right, I thought I would check in today. It's been quite a wee while and I have been very busy, but as well as that, I've just not really been in the mood, to be honest with you. Things have been getting a bit on top of me and I just needed to take some time out. But I am really happy to be back here today talking about everything, anything, and whatever we can think. So today I thought we would jump into a topic which is one of my favourites, and it's something I've been researching quite a lot recently for work, but also just for my personal pleasure. I really enjoy it. So how do I know other people are like me? How do I know other people are real? And why do I feel like I'm the only subject? So these are philosophical questions that we all ponder throughout the process of maturity. Existentialist philosophy contends that human existence is the primary problem in philosophy, and this does include the problem of other people. So I think we have all had notions of that, especially when we're children. So I used to think that the world wasn't there until I turned around and looked at it. And I think that's a very kind of common thing to think, especially as a child. But also then you have the problem of, what if other people are not there when I'm not there? What are the concept of other people? Do other people also have subjective qualities like I do? And do they view me as such of that object? So we'll be having a look at Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, one of my ultimate favourite philosophers in kind of 20th century existentialism. He is really fantastic when it comes to understanding the concept of what other people and how other people kind of make us. He is fantastic at explaining how other people create this awareness of ourselves and our subjectivity and our objectivity. A lot of what we're going to be covering today, I've read in Jean-Paul Sartre's Being and Nothingness, and also taking quite a lot of inspiration from the book Nausea as well. So we'll start up with what Sartre thinks about human intervention, human existence, and just meaning in general. So the recognition of qualia, or meaning, such as be on a mission. The understanding of meaning would not exist if humans weren't there to interpret it. To be honest with you, I do find this quite a selfish ideology, kind of very similar to George Berkeley's ideology of human intervention as well. But I do think it's very kind of selfish to think, if there were no perceptions of human intervention, if we are, the highest of intelligent life, then there wouldn't kind of have these pockets of meaning or qualia, or the idea of ultimate forms, things wouldn't exist. I don't really believe that, mainly just because I feel like humans are given this high pedestal of understanding, consciousness, and cognition, all these kind of things, however, seem to be the biggest downfall to themselves in humanity. So we're very, we like to think that we're very self-aware. However, if we were as self-aware as we possibly were, then these things wouldn't keep happening in combination and culmination again and again and again. But yeah, sorry, rant. So this is a small piece from Jean-Paul Sartre's Being and Nothingness, and then I'll move on to the annotation, of course. So, let us imagine that, moved by jealousy, curiosity, or vice, I have just glued my ear to the door and looked through a keyhole. I am now alone and on the level of non-theatic self-consciousness. This means that, first of all, there is no self to inhabit my consciousness, nothing, therefore, to which I can refer my acts in order to qualify them. So this first section is basically you are on your own and you are observing, you are the only observer, you are the only subject to observe these objects. They are in no way known. I am my acts, and hence they carry themselves in their whole justification. I am a pure consciousness of things, and things caught up in the circuit of my selfless, and offer to me their potentialities as proof of my non-theatic consciousness, or my own possibilities. This means that behind a door, a spectacle is presented to be seen, or a conversation is to be heard. But all of a sudden, I hear footsteps in the hall. Someone's looking at me, and what does this mean? It means that I am suddenly affected in my being, is that essential modifications appear in my structure, modifications I can apprehend and fix conceptually by means of the reflective cogito. So first of all, I now exist as myself for unreflective consciousness. In this eruption of self, which has been most often described, I see myself because somebody sees me, or as it is usually expressed. Only the reflective consciousness has the self directly for an object, and the unreflective consciousness does not apprehend the person directly or as the object. The person is presented to consciousness, insofar as that the person is an object for the other. This means that all of a sudden I am conscious of myself as escaping myself, not in that I am the foundation of my own nothingness, but that I am the foundation of the outside of myself. I am for myself only as I am pure reference to the other. So Sartre explains the notion of being seen as the object by another, and upon noticing their personhood, or more concisely, Sartre writes, being seen by the other is the truth of being the other. So this being seen by the other and being noticed by the other defines shame as something that we allow through the presence of another individual, somebody seeing us as an object, as we know that we can perceive them as the object. For example, in the beginning, where Sartre is imagining that we are moved by jealousy, curiosity, or vice, and you look through the keyhole, you are the only subject to be able to observe and cast observations on the objects that exist from your subjecthood. So therefore, as you become the object and you realize the others have the capacity to objectify you as they are also subjects, then you are able to feel either an emotion that Sartre describes closely to shame, almost as he describes it in Nausea, as the feeling of nausea. But you will also, if you learn to understand that objecthood and connect with that objecthood to be able to define it within your person, then ultimately you can feel quite proud of that. And pride comes from the regeneration of shame. Like to tell you a little anecdotal story that really kind of opens up for me, or was the first time that I really actually noticed and understood what Sartre meant by seeing oneself as the other. So late on a Friday night, I arrive home and order pizza online for delivery. It's about 20 minutes or so go by, and the action of ordering the pizza is far away from my mind. I've settled into my own private world, and I don't anticipate any interruption from outsiders. Sartre expresses this through an anecdote where he sits in the park alone. That's his personal space, and at that point, the park is truly his. Upon noticing another person, then the space becomes shared. He is noticed and he shares a look with the stranger. When the delivery driver arrived at my door, the doorbell chimed and it took me away from the solitary state where I was the only perceiver. Before this moment, I was the only subject that was able to perceive any objects, and as I open the door, the delivery driver notices me as the object. I am no longer in my own world of subjectivity, and I'm aware of my objecthood. There are now objects and subjects to be identified, and as my eyes meet his gaze, I just utter the phrase, "Cheers, thanks pal." And I notice another subject who has the capacity to completely objectify me as I do him. This is being in for itself, being for oneself, and being for the other. Sartre elucidates this perfectly as he says, "I feel the world stolen away from me upon recognising another person, and so we do." It's obviously clear that people exist. You know that you're yourself, you know that you exist. It's explored famously through the father of thought, René Descartes, in his 6 meditations, where, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. We're very aware that we have this own kind of internal subjective experience, and this internal subjective experience might not even describe the outside world, so how could it describe other? Also picked up in the chapter The Look in Jean-Paul Sartre's Being in Nothingness, Sartre writes, "Pure shame is not a feeling of being this or that guilty object, but in general of being an object." And when perceiving oneself, he explains that humans see ourselves as subjective, the centre of our own worlds, and is challenged upon recognising other people. We can see that other people exist because of the challenge and the action that comes and affects our life directly as a consequence of that. We can understand that these people do have subjective feelings as we do, and are able to objectify other people as well. And that's something that can make people feel deeply uncomfortable. And the uncomfortable feeling is also something that leads to the dissociation of understanding the recognition of other people. So as they refer to us, we become objects. We become things that are able to be consumed, and the sense of self can deflate and collapse. The agency of oneself is completely being confronted as we're taken away from our safe, right environment where we're always the curator of our own thoughts. But one may always be potentially the object for consumption. Conscious subjects always observe objects, and noticing one's object is being removed from subjectivity isn't always a bad thing. When you are the object, I am the object, anybody is the object, the idea of their agency is being taken away. Your recognition is purely based on somebody else's speculation of your action. An individual never really experience a third person perspective of oneself. We could never take ourselves out of our bodies, forget everything we know about ourselves, and then meet ourselves from a third person perspective as looking through the keyhole. It's never going to happen, and that's something that can cause great anxiety about a person, but can also cause a great sense of pride as well, based on the actions that you portray in kind of in line, in tow with your kindness, in tow with your compassion, and all of those. So to finish that off, really, just a little thought experiment. How do we think? When do you ever recognize yourself when you're not in the presence of another individual? When are you aware of yourself when you've not been made aware of these actions and causations? Yeah, I found it really interesting, but also it did really help as well. I feel like mentally, I feel a little bit of a weight has been lifted off my chest, understanding that this is a completely natural phenomenon and has been happening throughout human existence. Yeah, it's quite good.